Well, the book of Exodus tells the story of the Hebrews' flight from Egypt, how God delivered them from Pharaoh's army at the Red Sea crossing.
Theory that Mount Sinai is in Saudi Arabia didn't really get the treatment that it deserved.
A team of researchers in Saudi Arabia stumbled upon a discovery that could change everything we know about Mount Sinai. They found shocking proof that goes back to ancient times below the surface. Is this really Mount Sinai? Watch to find out the secret that has been kept for hundreds of years. The mountain that shouldn't be there. They were first hit by the heat. It was the kind of heat in the desert that makes metal shine and bends the air above the sand. By noon, it was over 120 degrees, and by night, it was bitterly cold from the wind. The convoy pushed west into the empty stretches of northwest Saudi Arabia, a place that not many people from outside the country ever see. The group wasn't on a journey or an adventure. The Saudi Heritage Ministry gave them a study permit that only let them do one thing: record the old caravan routes that connected the interior of Arabia to the coast of the Red Sea. Before Rome, they were just drawing maps of trade lines that brought incense and copper. There were field geologists to read the rock, historians to record where the pottery was found, drone pilots to follow the tracks of caravans from above, and 2 environmental engineers to make maps of places where water collects. Atheists were among the lead experts, and they were determined to show that the desert still had a logical story written in sand and stone. The land they came into was not friendly at all. From a bed of rust-colored gravel, sharp granite peaks rose up like broken teeth. A dry wind blew down from the hills at night, whistling between the rocks as a warning. During the day, the air was shaking from the heat. Bedouin farmers had made thin tracks that their trucks chewed up. After that, there was no sign of roads. The work was routine and easy for the first few days. They wrote down pieces of handmade storage jars that they found where old camps had been, took pictures of faint camel petroglyphs on low rocks, and marked the spot where an ancient caravan watering point had been. A shallow pit surrounded by stones that had been smoothed by the wind. It was normal to find these layers in a desert that had been used by traders for thousands of years. Then something that wasn't on their list showed up on the satellite monitor in the field tent. As the drone pilots looked over the afternoon passes over a faraway hill, one peak in the west stood out. The crown was almost black, which stood out against the light pink rock that made up the rest of the range. From above, it looked like the top of the mountain had been burned, like the coal tip that had been buried in sand. On the map, one of the scientists marked it as a surface albedo anomaly, which means it was an odd reflection of sunlight that needed to be studied. The next morning, they flew the drone straight over that target. The live feed showed a rocky peak that looked even darker in the direct sunlight. Its sides were cut by steep canyons that ended in bright sand flats. Compared to the other peaks within miles, the mountain's upper spine looked like it had been burned. They recorded the video and planned to hike it after finishing their main grid. As night fell and the desert got cooler, one of the drone pilots chose to do a thermal sweep. When the temperature information came back, the mountain with the dark top showed something even stranger. Even after the rock around it had cooled down with the sun going down, the top of the black peak was still giving off heat like an ember being banked. It wasn't high enough to say that there was volcanic activity, but it was noticeable that the spot was different. That night, the village guides warned everyone around the campfire. Families that raised sheep nearby knew about the mountain with the dark top. They had been going around the approach valley for decades, saying that the area was closed off and watched. There was still a rusty line of posts and wire scraps in some ditches, but the guide said no one knew who or why they had fenced it off. The study team had papers that said they could go into any of the nearby highlands, but it was clear that this mountain wasn't often crossed. The project's goal had changed by the end of that week. The caravan route plan was almost finished, but the scientists were not happy with just a shape on a picture from a drone. They were interested in getting samples of dirt, rock cores, and ground temperature readings. The group was told to go back the way they came and head for the Black Crown Peak. What started out as a quiet academic look at old lost roads turned into a diversion towards a strange formation that none of them could figure out from above. They didn't know yet that the next few hours on that burned-out slope would reveal clues that seemed to link to one of the oldest stories ever told in the desert. This set the stage for the shocking finds of the scorched peak and the broken rock. The rock that holds a secret. The team started their climb just as the sun was setting. The land was getting hot, but the air was still cool. As I climbed the rocky hill, each step felt like a fight with the ground. It was pretty easy for the first 50 feet, with just loose dirt and small rocks. But as they got higher, the rock they were walking on started to change. It was quiet at first. It was a soft rose color, like the color of the sky at dusk in the desert. The rocks got darker as they went higher, though. As they went further, the mountain got darker until they reached the top. The crown of the peak was amazing. It was completely black and burned, and it looked like it was soaking up all the heat from the rising sun. When the head geologist took out his field notes, he touched the dark surface of the rock with his fingers. He said, "Not volcanic," but the data seemed to show otherwise. There were no cinder cones or lava flows close, and there were no other signs that there had been volcanic activity. But the surface was hot and different from anything else he had seen. The top 2 to 3 centimeters of rock felt like it was on fire. He used his tools to break up the rock, and the surface was soft and brittle, almost as if it had been vitrified or heated very hot, but not long enough to make it melt all the way through. The inner granite wasn't burned or damaged in any way. Whatever took place here was on the surface and very serious. After that, tests in the lab ruled out lightning hits. The team didn't find any radial scars or other signs of burns that looked like lightning bolts. It also didn't look like there had been a blaze. There were no carbon traces or burned plants. There were no natural theories that fit the rock. The scientist looked at the data and had an idea, but he didn't say it yet. Could this be the same kind of heat that the Bible talks about in Exodus? Even though the thought kept coming back to them, the team kept their attention on what they were doing. Unexplained thermal event was the official name, but it was hard to miss the similarities with things written in ancient times. As they continued to climb, the first of their big finds became clear as they got closer to the middle of the slope. A rock that was almost 20 feet tall and split down the middle stood in front of them. Its sharp edges curved like the opening of a jar. The stone was split in half, but the crack was very deep and went all the way to the ground. As they went around it, they saw something even stranger. The low sides of the split rock were smooth because water had worn them down over time, what you'd expect to see in a place that has been washed by water for thousands of years. But here, in this dry, empty land, the difference was very clear. One of the hydrologists noticed the pattern and pointed out a cut in the rock below the split. It spread out like a fan, sending out waves at exact angles. It was clear that water used to flow through the ground below the rock, which shouldn't have been possible in this desert. The rock looked so strange when it was dry, but it was once shaped by water moving over it. It was impossible to ignore what it meant. The team quickly looked up Exodus 17:6, which says that Moses hit a rock and water came out of it to quench the Israelites' thirst in the desert. The verse, "Strike the rock and water will pour out," kept playing over and over in their heads, but they didn't say anything. It wasn't time for them to make claims yet, especially since everyone was watching. They made sure to call it a textual parallel and not a result because the similarity was too strong to ignore. The thought stuck around though, is this the rock? The mountain may be hidden under years of sand and rock, but could this be the exact spot where Moses hit the rock? The drone camera flew around the broken rock and took pictures of every part of it. It was clear what they were seeing, even though the wind howled as it went over the hill. The stone seemed to hold secrets that had been hidden for thousands of years, ready to be found by a group of people who had no idea what they were going to find. Even though the pictures were creepy, the question remained, was it real? The team then moved on to the next puzzle, not knowing the shocking news that was about to come. They still had a long way to go and were just starting to figure out what they had found. The altar of the golden calf. As the sun rose higher, the team dug in near the base of the mountain. They used trowels and shovels to break up the dry ground and looked around for anything that might help them figure out what that strange mountain was. A low, wind-blown trench was dug around the outside of a nearly 30-meter-wide circle-shaped formation that was partly hidden under sand and loose stones. Something strange had already been seen in the drone LiDAR images, and now they were here to see it for themselves. The strange shape didn't seem to belong there. It looked like the footprint of a giant that had been forgotten. It was the kind of thing that suggested long-lost practices before anyone thought to dig. An archaeologist in the field quickly saw the first clue that this wasn't a natural creation. On a nearby big stone panel, there were rough carvings of bulls and cows that went deep into the rock. The crescent-shaped horns of the animals looked a lot like ancient symbols. That style wasn't found in any known Islamic folk art. That style was more stylized and geometric. These people were different. They looked crude, almost tribal, and clearly from the country. The pattern looked like it was from a long time ago, a time that wasn't recorded in the area's past. The team dug deeper under the rock panel and found big, unmarked blocks laid out in an open circle pattern. The structure's plan wasn't really organized. The stones fit together randomly, stacked and worn down by years of being outside. Still, there was a purpose hidden beneath the layers of dirt that made the placement seem planned. Carbon pieces were found in dirt that was sent to a lab. The results gave a possible date range: late Bronze Age to early Iron Age. That puts the date of this site between 1200 and 600 BCE, which is a long time before the first big Islamic powers came to the area. The team had to take a step back and think about what they could do. It was clear what they had found, but it wasn't clear what it meant. They weren't ready to make any big claims yet, so at first, they thought they had found an old tribal altar or a pastoral cult site. It was possible that it was connected to early desert tribes that practiced worship or sacrifice practices. They had no idea at that point that there was a link to Exodus or the story of the golden calf. While the sun was going down and creating long shadows over the altar, one of the team members had an idea. Suddenly, the scene changed from the desert to scenes from Exodus 32, where the Israelites make a golden calf and worship it without Moses. This thought crossed his mind. The similarities were very clear. A place of prayer in the middle of the desert. Picture of animals, a sign of worshiping gods. Could this be the spot where, according to the Bible, the Israelites went to worship a false god while Moses was on the mountain? The team talked about it back at camp. The lead geologist, who was a vocal atheist, quickly ruled out any link to Exodus. He said, "We're not here to chase Bible stories," and he warned against the risks of a Bible-hunting bias. He was sure that they should stick to the facts and not get caught up in religious stories. The younger scout wasn't sure, though. The pictures on the stones were too similar to how the Bible talks about the story of the golden calf. The stone altar, the age of the site, and the way it had been worn down all seemed too similar to what they knew from the Exodus story. The argument got hot as tensions rose between their strict scientific methods and the clear images they were finding. As the fight got worse, their representative in Saudi Arabia stepped in and ordered a temporary cordon around the site. This stopped any further digging until a full heritage review could be done. There was a clear sign that the authorities were taking over. They knew that this find could have big effects on both archaeology and religious history. While the group stood around the altar, they had a strong sense that this place held more than they had thought. There were now rows of stones going out from the platform and into the desert. GPS markers showed that they were almost exactly lined up from east to west, which was a strange feature that looked more like it was planned than a natural stone arrangement. The lines seemed to point somewhere, but it wasn't clear which way they were going. Ritual stones and the mountain's hidden shape. The team kept looking at the base of the mountain in the long shadows made by the morning light. Using a planned drone grid, they started to find what looked like a line of boundary marks. A rough arc of dozens of waist-high stone pillars, set about 15 to 20 meters apart, went around the lower slopes of the mountain. The shape wasn't just a bunch of stones thrown together. It looked planned, almost too well put together to be ignored. There was a clear boundary, not just a natural accident, as the line seemed to follow the natural shape of the land, hugging the hills until they broke off suddenly at a northeast gulch. The pattern was proven by the team's GIS mapping. This wasn't just a bunch of rocks thrown together. The stones were put there on purpose. They spread out from a central point and formed a fence-like shape around the mountain. It was hard to escape the link to Exodus 19:12 in the Bible. Set limits for the people around the mountain. Was this a border for a ritual? People who worshipped there in the past may have been told to stay away from something holy or dangerous. As the team wrote down the markers, they felt anxiety rising. Within a few days, Saudi heritage officers showed up and put up fencing around the outside road that leads to the spot. They also put up CCTV poles around the outside. The official word was that it was a safety step to keep the site safe. But soon, bloggers and news outlets started talking about a cover-up. The mountain was being closed off. Did this find deserve to be made public for being too important? One of the most interesting things the team found, though, was something geological that made their thoughts race. When seen from a certain angle, just below the burned top, the mountain's ridge made the clear shape of a pregnant woman lying down. The shape of a head, nose, chin, and a big round belly could be seen in the rock creation, which had been formed by natural erosion over thousands of years. The similarity was so strong that it couldn't be ignored. A discoverer and photographer in the group remembered that the people had called this ridge Hajar for a long time. This name stuck in their minds. Indeed, Hajar was the name given to Hagar in the Bible. She was Abraham's servant woman who gave birth to his son Ishmael. The line from Galatians 4 that says Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia rang out, and the team felt the weight of it. Could this mountain ridge's shape really lead to the place Paul had talked about? Is this the same Sinai that Paul wrote about in his letter to the Galatians? At the end, not even the most doubtful team member could deny it. They couldn't figure out why the ritual setting they were finding seemed to have a lot in common with biblical themes. Even though there was more and more evidence, a peer-reviewed study still did not support the site. The story was just starting to come together. Sealed by stone. As word of the team's results spread, the Saudi government acted quickly and decisively. In the months after the find, new signs near the base of the mountain went up to show that the area was a protected heritage site. The local government set limits on tour groups and made it clear that no one would be able to visit without permission. They made it harder to get a license to dig and said things like site conservation and public safety. What started out as a study project for school was now under close government supervision. The researchers on the site didn't have much room to move, and their work was closely watched because they needed special permits to dig any deeper. The scholarly world was in a mess. On the one hand, standard archaeologists wanted stratified digs and dates that could be checked in a lab. They wanted more proof before coming to any conclusions. They asked for a careful, methodical technique to find out how old the site really is. At the same time, Near East historians told people to be careful and not look at the place through the lens of religious texts. They told the team not to try to find patterns in the Bible and in the archaeological findings, because it might lead to wrong conclusions. On the other hand, fringe researchers jumped at the chance to call the site the real Sinai, even though they didn't think it needed any more proof, because they were eager to connect it to Bible history. As the argument went on, the idea of a tech push came up. Non-invasive methods were offered as a way to learn more about the site without upsetting the fragile ground. Micro-tremor subsurface scans might find structures too deep for normal excavation, while muon imaging could show secret chambers below the surface. It was suggested that portable XRF, X-ray fluorescence tests could be used to look at the altar stones without breaking any rules about heritage. People wanted these technologies because they wanted to protect the site and because they thought they could help them find even deeper secrets. It was impossible to miss the religious meanings of the place. Rabbis, pastors, and imams all had something to say. Each group had a different point of view. Some people were interested in the possible link to Sinai, while others thought it was just a side issue that wasn't important to their faith. Scholars from different religions warned that calling this place the biblical Mount Sinai could cause political problems between religions. As the desert continues to reveal its secrets, the mystery deepens. Like, share, and subscribe for more discoveries. And don't forget to click on the next video popping up on your screen to keep discovering.